launched in January 2020. So we launched 2 months before COVID dominated the entire thing. So we had 2 busy months of everyone going, hey, this is interesting. And then all of a sudden, another disaster turned up. It just wasn't the one we were shouting about. We need to separate the notion that sustainability always means more expensive. A cyclone in 2019 called Cyclone Kenneth, and in 5 minutes, 10 years' work was just gone.
This is the Green on the Go podcast, where we talk about keeping travel sustainable. And for this episode, I got to speak to sustainable travel writer, speaker and consultant, Jeremy Smith. Hi, Jeremy, and welcome to the Green on the Go podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi there, India. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So could you just start by giving us a little briefing on your background, what you get up to for work, and kind of why we're talking to you today?
So I'm a Brit now living in France, in the south of France. I have been working in tourism and sustainability, well, tourism for 15 odd years and sustainability since the turn of the millennium. I focus on how we can make tourism more sustainable.
Yeah, and obviously you're a speaker, you're a writer, you're a consultant as well. So you kind of...
These are the things I do, yes.
Yeah, they're sort of come over. And I know that you've got your fingers in quite a lot of pies within the sustainable tourism world, which we will dive into. But I just wanted to start with a little statement that you've got on your website. Which sort of says, whatever I'm doing, my aim is to transform tourism into a regenerative industry. So I'd love you to explain that a little bit more and sort of go into that vision a little bit more for us.
I come into tourism as a lover of holidays, as someone who thinks that the opportunities that those of us who are lucky enough to go on holiday and go around the world or around the country are some of the sort of most enjoyable and enriching parts of our lives. And at the same time, I work on trying to focus on sustainability and to make things more sustainable. But I think for a lot of people, sustainability feels dull. It feels like it's nothing more than trying to reduce the negative impacts of what we do. But I think it can be much more than that. I think that, and regenerative, that idea to transform something to be regenerative, is that I go on holiday to have a better time, to be more enriched, to discover wonderful ways of being, incredible new foods, incredible new experiences. And I want to go back and have a better time the second time, rather than go back and just have, see that things aren't as good as they once were. I want all of us in tourism to see that we have an incredible opportunity to enrich people's lives, to make oceans richer with fish and cleaner waters, to hopefully, have forests more filled with bird song. And that is, to me, is regenerative at its simplest, is the idea that we shouldn't just try to make less damage, we should try to make more good. Yeah,
because that's the thing. I think what I've experienced is quite often the human race goes on holiday to switch off from what is going on in the world, and so they become a little bit more lazier on holiday. If you're recycling at home, you sort of don't bother when you're on holiday because you're in this kind of relaxed whatever vibe. And actually the irony behind that is that you're making it worse for yourself to want to go on holiday in the future. And I think this is so important to remind people that we need this regenerative idea to be at the forefront of our holiday making in order to make it better for our holiday experiences in the future. That's coming from quite a selfish point of view, and then there's the whole impact it has having on the planet and everything else. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. And actually it's a message that I think the travel industry needs to hammer home a little bit more. I don't know if you,
Yeah, no, I mean, but also I do think it can connect, and that's a model. It's not just for tourism; it's for all of us. But as you said, if I go to the beach and take home a shell, and I understand why people like to take home shells. I'm not trying to don't take home shells, but every time you take home a shell, the beach has a few less shells on it. But if every time you went to the beach, you picked up a piece of rubbish, every time you go to the beach has less rubbish on it. And as you said, next time you go back, the beach is cleaner. I don't want to swim in plastic bottles. I want to swim on a coral reef and with lots of shells.
Yeah, and that's the thing. None of us are going to want to go to these beautiful places if they're not looking like we imagine them to look. So it's so important that we take care of them.
Yeah.
Now, one of the many projects that you're involved in is something that you co-founded, which is Tourism Declares Climate Emergency. So if you could tell us a little bit about this project, why you founded it, when it came about, how it came about, and just dive in to tell us a little bit more about it.
It came about just about 2 years ago. Sitting here in September 2021, it came about, the conversations began in September 2019, and it came out of a combination of a frustration that our industry we felt wasn't doing enough to address our impacts on the climate emergency, both our negative impacts, but also our potential for positive regenerative change, and the feeling that we really, if we got together, we could do much more. The name Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency came because back in 2016, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia, called Darebin declared a climate emergency, and that was the first time in the world that anywhere had declared a climate emergency. Since then, up to 2,000 places around the world, ranging from little suburbs and villages and towns and cities to counties, to the UK government has declared a climate emergency, the Scottish government has declared a climate emergency, so you get up to countries and even to the EU Parliament. All along there, these are places, places that people live, and places that people live are also places that people visit, that we go on holiday to. And before COVID decimated our industry, the main conversation in our industry was about the concern that more and more places were getting overcrowded, that people were saying, there's too much tourism. And the response of the industry is we must listen more to what communities want. We must understand what communities want, because in the end, if I'm a holidaymaker and I go on holiday, I want to feel welcome. I don't want to go to somewhere where they're all just going, can you just go away, please? I want to feel welcome. It makes a much better holiday for me if the people whose homes I'm basically visiting seem delighted to have me spending money in their shops and sitting in their restaurants and swimming off their beaches. Well, if all these communities, 2,000 around the world and more, are declaring a climate emergency in their community, and we want to be welcome in their community, it makes sense that tourism should be part of that effort to respect the climate and to declare a climate emergency and to go into it. So that's where it began. It's grown ever since for the last 2 years. We now have 306 companies, destinations, different organizations who have made that shared commitment. And we are working with a range of other organizations, ranging from a couple of UN bodies, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, the United Nations Environment Programme, and various others, to develop a sort of shared approach based in the needs of science for tourism that we will take to COP26, which is the climate conference taking place in Glasgow in November, to support everyone, however big or small or whatever part of tourism they're in, to come up with the plans necessary to do this. I mean, you need a plan. You can't just randomly hope that your complex business or your hotel or your tour operator destination will somehow magically become climate friendly. You need to understand what impacts you have, what opportunities for change you have, and then work out what to do about it. Again, if one person does it, that's all very well. But if everyone's doing it, the best thing they can also then do is share their ideas, so we're not left starting from scratch with a blank sheet of paper all the time.
Mm-hmm. And this plan, have you got a sort of representative from every organization that's sort of, or is there sort of key figures that are coming up with the plan and then you're sharing it with the 300 plus members?
No, everything comes from the organization. Every organization that has joined Tourism Declares makes their shared commitments, and their shared commitment is, first of all, that they commit to, on their own website, publicly stating that they declare a climate emergency, to say this is an emergency. We need to treat climate change as not something that's going to happen in 30 years' time, but something, as we all see increasingly, as something that's happening now. We have to respond to it with the urgency of an emergency. Secondly, we will commit to publishing a climate action plan. Thirdly, we will base that in science of what we need to do. Fourthly, we'll collaborate. And finally, fifth, that we will advocate, we will speak out for the necessary changes. Once someone has made that commitment, I can't, our industry is so complicated. Tour operators, travel agents, rental cars, hotels, hotel chains, bed and breakfasts, Airbnbs, etc., etc. And that's just the beginning, in restaurants, attractions, etc. And each one of those is different if it's on a beach, on a mountain, in a city, for business travelers, designed for student backpackers, etc. There can't be a one-size-fits-all plan. It would be a meaningless top 10 lists of how to make tourism environmentally friendly. It has to come from the company, the organization, the destination itself, but it has to be aligned broadly to the requirements of science. And we can learn from one another, because if you've got a clever way of engaging your guests in recycling, it might be that I can adapt that clever way of engaging my guests in recycling to my hotel, rather than just sitting there going, what do we do? So it's a balance of sharing ideas, knowing that everything has to be adaptable to the individual's experience, but also that the sums have to add up.
And was it, this tourism declares climate emergency, was this something that came out of lockdown, sort of, or was it something you had ticking over in your mind for a while, and then you had the time over lockdown to make it a thing?
It started just before lockdown. I registered the Twitter account in May 2019, and in fact I registered it. It's a lodge that I'd been lucky enough to go to, a beautiful lodge in Mozambique, on the beaches of northern Mozambique, that had won every award in tourism sustainability for the last sort of 10 years. There was a cyclone in 2019 called Cyclone Kenneth, and in 5 minutes 10 years work was just gone, and the lodge never reopened. It just was wiped out in 5 minutes of a climate related disaster. And at that point I was like, okay, we need to think about this. So I read this thing. Conversations over the following months developed it. We launched in January 2020. So we launched 2 months before COVID dominated the entire thing. So we had 2 busy months of everyone going, hey, this is interesting. And then all of a sudden another disaster turned up. It just wasn't the one we were shouting about.
Yeah. But I guess COVID obviously put the travel industry on pause, but I guess it meant that people in the industry had time to rethink what they were doing, maybe.
I think, yes, a little bit.
Get together and discuss these ideas. And have you found that has given this whole project a kind of a platform or an opportunity to restart and give these new ideas a go?
I think it's undoubtedly defined how we have developed, and has created some situations that we have been able to benefit from, and definitely can create some situations that we haven't. I'll be more specific, but that very rapidly, we were developing, people were getting excited about it, and then COVID shut the industry down in March 2020, and it hasn't obviously properly reopened. It has begun getting there, but it meant that people who, in February 2020, everyone's like, yeah, we've got business, we've got capacity, we've got staff, we could probably put aside a bit of time or energy towards thinking about how we could do this. Mm-hmm. By April 2020, people were just like rabbits staring at headlights, just going, how do I even imagine my own business in 3 months' time? And a year and a half later, our industry endlessly rearranges itself, reinvents itself as they go, let's try and get some guests from here. Shut. Let's try and get some guests over there. Shut. Oh, we can't do that. Quarantine. Oh, we can't do this. Having the headspace and having to let go of staff because there's been no money coming in for a lot of businesses. I mean, lots of hotels have been busy and full with domestic guests. But if your business model was that you took tourists on international holidays to South America to go and explore the Amazon, you haven't got any holidays because but very few people have been flying from the UK or Europe or whatever to Peru to go and explore the Amazon right now. And so you were reinventing your business. And so while all these companies have been constantly reinventing themselves with no income, on hugely reduced staff, while potentially having to still pay their staff through furlough or depending what it might be, they haven't had the capacity to work out what a climate action plan looks for a company when they don't even know what it will look like in a year's time
hasn't
anyway.
Been a priority. Priority is getting
it can't be a priority.
Business off the ground again. It's
no, but likewise, if if you've got 2 young children and you've been homeschooling your children throughout the January, February, March, April, whatever it was of this year when people were doing that, and trying to keep your company afloat, and trying to do this, and making sure you don't get COVID yourself. We all know what this year was like and the end of last year. No one had the headspace to go, and Now it gets to 9 o'clock at night. I think I might just plan some strategy for the next 20 years. You were just like, oh, I certainly was. And so there's been a lot of that. That's the negative side of it. The positive side of it, there's been an amazing, we've been able to develop through the amazing work and commitment of a sort of fluid, ever-evolving group of volunteers who have just, clicked on the thing on our website and then said, I see you're looking for volunteers. Well, I find myself without work despite 10 years experience, or I'm down to 2 days a week or whatever it might be. I'm passionate about tourism. I'm passionate about sustainability. How can I help? And we have evolved through that. And that has been, the most inspiring part of, sitting alone in France, working through Zoom, but connecting to loads and loads and loads of people around the world who've wanted to be part of helping us do what we do. So, and yes, there's definitely, going back to what you first said, people, there is a recurrent conversation, which is, what does tourism look like next? We have to be more sustainable. And that has opened up doors to people who said, I don't know what I'm able to do, but I'm definitely open to some conversations.
Because there's a phrase going around the travel industry, which is build back better, isn't it? If we've got this chance to come back, we might as well do it in a positive way that's going to give the industry a greater future. So how, just out of curiosity, how was your work affected by the pandemic? Were you before jet setting around and giving sort of speak talks and all sorts, or were you able to keep your work kind of on Zoom and keep your messages going?
I certainly wasn't able to be jet setting around or traveling anywhere by train around Europe because of lockdowns, obviously. Plus, there'd been no events, so no one was inviting people to come and fill a room of 300 people and talk to them about anything. So there was an awful lot of talking on Zoom, but there's very little financial model in talking on Zoom to people, because we've all got webinar fatigue, and people people were paying me to go and run workshops and talk and so on. They weren't paying me to come and to sit on Zoom and talk to things. It's been difficult. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and it's just beginning to evolve back out the other side now. It's been much more difficult for many other people. So I don't have a company behind me that I'm having to worry about my staff.
I know that there's another project you're heavily involved in is Travindi, which is a tourism news website. Is that correct?
I'm not so in. I set it up several years ago.
Right.
Myself and a friend set it up several years ago, about 6 years ago. And again, that came from seeing a gap that there was no site to go to for the industry to look at sustainable tourism news. And all it is, or not all it is, what it is a gathering, a curation of content from around the internet that we bring together, so that there is a place where people can go and read in one place news on what's happening in tourism and sustainability. I have no day-to-day involvement in it now. I'm the founder, and I make sure the website's still alive. And I make sure if suddenly the people who are working on it stopped working on it, it would probably fall on me to find some more people to work on it. But Tourism Declares has taken up all my workload, all my capacity for the last 2 years, because it has developed and grown beyond my imagination. So I have been very grateful that a couple of wonderful people have been running it in my absence, and hopefully will carry on doing so.
Yeah. Well, what was there, out of curiosity, was there any sort of stories that came up then? I don't know if they came up on Travindi, or if it just from your knowledge of positive effects of COVID on the travel industry, because there's obviously been a lot in the press of the negativity and how many people lost jobs and everything. But positive press gets suppressed, doesn't it, by the negativity?
It does indeed. I think the one thing that I thought was really positive, which was in the first lockdown, way back then in the distant past of whatever we're talking about, April 2020 and May 2020 sort of thing. And it was at the same time as, we all were busy. Everyone, you couldn't get through a day without watching another sort of Italian couple singing from a balcony, or people getting on the street to do whatever they were doing. And there was that lovely sort of sense of solidarity. We all believed that this would last 3-4 months and we would be back out by the summer, and everyone was there was a real sense of support. And it was there was a lot of quite inspiring stories of people doing decent things. And when tourism was shut down, there was a real mark of solidarity. And there's things, so hotels that had no guests, and so would just say, right, our entire hotel is free for all hospital workers who are coming in to deal with the crisis, or all the homeless people in our town have now got somewhere to sleep, and those sort of things. Or we're going to make sure that all the food that we grow in our kitchen, create in our kitchens, we can support people with this. And there was several stories of visitor boards, so destination marketing organizations, your Visit London, Visit California or whatever, who had no one to look at the website because no one was visiting London or California. Now, normally all the people going to their website would be tourists looking at a website to go to a city they didn't know. So several of these visitor board websites sort of pivoted towards providing information about the town, the village, the city, whatever, to local people, but telling them these are the restaurants that are doing delivery. These are the restaurants where you can go and get takeout. Here's some places that are still open for you to go for a walk when you're allowed out for 2 hours. And they said, we understand how to communicate experiences, opportunities, whatever. We have a different responsibility right now, and that is to do that there. And I thought that obviously was only for the moment. It was for the moment of the crisis, but it did show a real potential for how we can be tourism for the community and for the visitor. And there's no reason. Most hotels are empty, most hotels are not full at any one time. Maybe peak July, August, or whenever your peak season is. Well, let's suppose that hotel always had 10% of its rooms empty. They could still be giving free nights to medics coming in to do X or Y. It doesn't only do it during COVID. That could be a sort of thing that we could do as our sense of hospitality, could be to say, well, how can we support the emergency services, or how can we support whatever else it might be? And I think that was, there was real potential for that sort of thing.
Because at the end of the day, I guess the heart of tourism is about creating a comfortable and positive experience for someone, and that can be whether you're from down the road or you're from the other side of the world. And I guess it's those transferable skills that people were able to utilize, and I think that's absolutely amazing. And I know that one sort of positive that you did over lockdown is your book Transforming Travel. You decided to make this free to people to read over the pandemic. Is it still free for people to read?
I don't know the answer to if it's still free.
Okay.
I haven't checked, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the answer to it.
I was going to say, why did you choose to make it free?
Because it was more important it was something I could do. I wasn't able to do very much. I was living in an isolated farmhouse in southwest France, far from anyone. I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And I thought, well, what could I do? Well, I thought, well, people are sitting at home, they've got nothing to do, they could read. So I contacted the publisher and said, what do you think to us making this book free for the foreseeable future, so that people can download it and just read it and get some inspiration on the best tourism can be, which is what the book was about. How can we imagine a positive form of tourism? The publishers thought that was a really nice idea. So they did. I mean, it was that, that was all really.
And do you think by doing that you've reached more people, and have you had some sort of...
I hope so. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't tracked how many free copies were downloaded, because it was the ebook that was free. It wasn't like they were sending people print copies of the book. They were just downloading ebooks. I am sure that some were, but I honestly wouldn't have a clue how many. But I'd be nice to think that, somewhere, someone got inspired for something that they would, their next bit of tourism is recovering as a result of something they read.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is this whole idea for when people travel, because the way that we're working now has changed, the fact that people can work from home more, and people are reimagining and re-looking at the way that they're booking their holidays. Maybe they can go for longer, maybe they can incorporate staying out, going for a week of leisure and then working for 2 weeks after that, just in a new place, and absorbing the culture more. And I think there is potential for this re-education of the way we travel. So having things like your book available for people to, I guess, kind of entertain them with these ideas is a great idea. So I'd love to sort of go back to what you were talking about earlier on, to do with the COP26. So I know that obviously you're in the midst of working towards this Tourism Declares Climate Emergency Plan, and the blueprint is going to be published in time for the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26 as we know it, in November. So is it on track? Is the first question.
God, the tough question, eh? It's yes and no. It's both. It's become bigger than I thought it would be, and that therefore means it's not necessarily on track. This has been a challenging year for all of us, and Tourism Declares, who hoped we would get funding to support us in what we're doing, didn't get funding to support us in what we're doing. So we've been doing this as volunteers when we can. So be it. Then again, when we first said we would publish the blueprints, no one knew what that meant, including myself, but we knew that we was going to provide whatever support we could to our industry to develop a new vision of our industry based around being, in tune with the needs of the climate. To be honest, when you say something like, not you, but one says something like a blueprint, people, I imagine, expect that it's going to be some sort of downloadable PDF 30-page thing that's the blueprint for the future of tourism, which it might have possibly been in conception one in sort of November, December last year when we started thinking that's what we would do. It has expanded beyond that because, going back to what we were saying at the beginning of our conversation, tourism is so complicated: hotel, tour operator, village, beach, river, mountain, that you can't have a simple, here is the blueprint for tourism. All you need to do is read that and you will be able to find your role in it. There's much more than that, but then we now have a range of things. There's a declaration which we've been working on with various UN bodies, including the UNFCCC, which is the UN climate body, that brings tourism around a framework to get to net zero, to have science-based targets, to measure what it's doing. We're developing a series of recommended actions, of which there are sort of 40 recommended actions spread across all sectors. We're developing ways for those to then be looked at for different sectors. We're working on workshops with various regions in Europe and various other organizations to actually help them develop their climate action plans. All of these bits and pieces, we've got two methodologies, one for tour operators, one for accommodation. It's no longer a single, the blueprint. It's a multitude of different bits that together maybe, and I don't want to sound grandiose in saying this, but maybe together they are part of a blueprint for a new form of tourism. But it's going to be an ever evolving, fluid thing that relies upon collaboration, relies upon people getting in. I'd like to think that we've got the blueprint for the blueprint, that it needs to be collaborative, that it needs to be aligned with what climate necessitates that we do for our imprints, that it must be measured, that it must be this, that it must reflect the different situations people find themselves in. And every bit that we add to it fits with all of that. We certainly won't have the final word by the time we get to November, but we might have the first word.
It's a start. And
yeah.
From a sort of personal opinion, from experience, what do you hope comes out of COP26 with regards to the travel industry? What do you hope will be discussed and kind of put forward?
I think, what I hope would be that the commitments, the framework that and when I say we, I mean Tourism Declares has been working with Visit Scotland, United Nations Environment Programme, United Nations World Tourism Organization, the Travel Foundation, and a vast body of reviewers and other people feeding into it for this commitment to develop tourism in line with the needs of the climate. I hope that there will be growing consensus by major players in the industry, by small innovative players in the industry, by destinations, all sorts, around the idea that this broadly aligned framework makes sense. And it is based around 5 key points: that you need to measure what you do, because otherwise where are you going to get to? That you have to decarbonize in line with what science and climate says, which roughly means cut emissions in half by 2030. That it's not enough just to measure and to decarbonize. We also need to be regenerative. Goes right back to the first question you asked me at the beginning of why I talk about that in my thing. That we need to see tourism and our opportunity to protect the rainforests, to clean up the oceans, to ensure that dolphins survive, etc., etc. That we need to collaborate. This isn't about competing with one another. When it comes to climate change, we all win or we all lose. We have to, obviously some people lose more seriously than others. I it's a sweeping statement I made, but it is, we have to work together. There's no point competing on this one. And finally, we have to find the money to do it. This has to be financed. It's all very well saying, hey, I've got a great plan, I'm going to save the world. But unless we can actually support those communities to be able to make those changes, it's just going to be more hot air and, you know, nice words. So I really hope that we begin to seriously embrace our opportunity and responsibility as an industry that is very proud to say or claim that it is 1 in 10 people in the world's jobs are supported by tourism, and 10% of the world's GDP is supported by tourism. And the key is supported. 1 in 10 jobs supported means a taxi driver whose job is supported by tourism. He doesn't necessarily only get money from tourism, but it's still hugely influential. Well, with that scale of influence, we also therefore should be seeing what opportunities we have to engage and make the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll watch this space now, and I really hope that that does come from it. So if for somebody looking, you know, from your experience, from your expertise, from your personal experiences, for someone looking to book a trip now that travel is returning, what message would you give to your kind of, I want to say average tourist, but I don't know what that means. I mean, there's so many different types of tourism, but I guess you could say family of 4 going on holiday or couple going on holiday. What advice could you give them if they wanted to book a trip? Is there sort of a couple of key points that you would say to look out for in order to make their trip more sustainable?
First of all, being more sustainable doesn't necessarily mean is more expensive. There are an awful lot of sustainable ways of seeing the world on holiday that aren't more expensive. I mean, the most sustainable holidays are ones that involve things like going camping or cycling or whatever, and those are certainly not the expensive ones. The expensive ones are the ones that involve you flying to the other side of the world in first class. That's, you know, the least sustainable and the most expensive way of traveling. So we need to separate the notion that sustainability always means more expensive. However, what I think we should make much more of a connection with is the idea that that those hotels, tour companies, destinations that care about sustainability, that means they're probably going to give you a better holiday too, because you've mentioned it earlier about how tourism is about hospitality, and whether it's hospitality of people who are nearby or people who are far away. Well, when that company really cares about how the food was grown that it's going to be serving in the restaurant, or really cares about how their staff are trained, or their relationship with the local community, or cleaning up their beaches, well, those are the people I want to go on holiday with, because those are the people for whom I'm not just a client, I'm a guest. I'm someone who's coming to have a wonderful experience, who they're proud to show me, can we show you what amazing work we're doing here? Or when you go out into the forest, it's quiet and it's clean and it's beautiful and it's restored. You know, if you're going to go on safari, you're much better off going on safari with someone who the ranger is a conservationist who really understands the animals they're going to show you and will teach you amazing things, than someone who's just going to whiz the Jeep around and then hope for a tip. So try to see, you know, a care for sustainability in all its forms: social sustainability, cultural sustainability, environmental sustainability, as someone who is caring, as someone who wants to be hospitable. And those should be the people you should be wanting to have your holiday with.
Absolutely. That totally makes sense. You know, yeah, somebody who cares will be cares for the planet, will be caring about you and your experience too, and it will come around full circle. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me today. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm looking forward to the blueprint coming out, whatever it is. I will be reading
we all.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you'll need a holiday after that.
Yeah, certainly shall, India.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you. Good luck with everything. And yeah, we really look forward to following your journey. And if anybody wanted to kind of find out more about you, the work you do, or even get you in as a speaker, how can they do that?
Go to my website, jmcsmith.com.
Yeah.
That's the easiest place to find me. And all the other things that we've talked about can all be found there.
Brilliant. One-stop shop.
Or find me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Smith, tourism. If you type Jeremy Smith and tourism in, it will be me. So, you know, there we go.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much indeed. Cheers.
Of course, course, it was communist, it was not communist, it was Stalinist. You know, it was kind of a North Korean style of a country. It was probably really bad, but